I want you to imagine, just for a moment, a really profound silence.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, you are sitting in the audience of a classical no theater. And this is in 15th century Japan. The air is cool, it is totally still, and it's smelling faintly of, like, ancient cypress wood.
Right, very atmospheric.
Exactly. And on this polished, incredibly simple wooden stage, an elite artist is performing. The movements are glacial, they are deliberate, and just fiercely disciplined.
There are no special effects. Right?
No, none. No loud explosions, no crazy lighting. It is just a performer in a carved wooden mask. And they are commanding the space with this absolute, almost supernatural presence, to the point where you literally forget to breathe.
Wow. That is quite an image to hold on to.
It is, right? Now keep that profound stillness in your mind, and I want you to violently smash it into a second image.
Uh-oh, here we go.
A modern corporate boardroom on a Tuesday morning. The fluorescent lights are buzzing, the air is just thick with skyrocketing blood pressure.
Oh, I know that room.
We all know that room. And there's a team of hyper-caffeinated executives staring at a dashboard. And they are watching an AI model essentially dismantle their entire business strategy in real time.
Yeah, that is a wildly jarring collision of worlds. I mean, going from ancient Kyoto to a panicked boardroom.
Totally jarring.
But the thing is, if you look closely at the undercurrents of human psychology, those two scenes are essentially identical.
Which, crazy to think about.
It is. But if we look at the conceptual backdrop of our deep dive today, you can imagine it as exactly this blend. It is the faint, glowing, hyper-fast digital network nodes of the AI era, but they are layered directly over the sweeping, deliberate, ancient brushstrokes of a medieval Japanese landscape.
I'm so glad you framed it that way, because it brings us right into the absolute heart of what we are unpacking today.
Yeah, it is a fascinating document we have.
It really is. So we got our hands on this piece of research that just completely blew my mind. It's a technical note from the Takasugi Research Institute.
The TRI, right, out of Tokyo.
Right, TRI out of Tokyo. And it's dated April 2026. So the director there, Professor Hisataka Takasugi, published this paper. And the title is Seeing from Outside While Acting from Within.
Catchy title, honestly.
Yeah, it draws you in. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore the wild, totally unexpected convergence that he lays out in this paper.
Because he essentially proves that a 600-year-old esoteric theatrical concept is the exact psychological survival mechanism you need today.
Right. Without exaggeration, he is saying this ancient performance trick is exactly what you're going to need to survive the artificial intelligence revolution.
And what is truly revolutionary about the synthesis in this research is that it reclassifies something we used to think of as, just a rare artistic gift.
Like a talent you were just born with.
Exactly. But the capacity to observe yourself while you are simultaneously engaged in high-stakes action that isn't just a neat trick for elite performers anymore.
No, it's basically mandatory now.
It is the indispensable, universal cognitive skill for modern leadership. I mean, we are talking about the fundamental mechanics of how the human mind handles extreme, paradigm-shifting pressure.
So, to understand how you, the person listening to this right now, driving your car or doing the dishes, how you are going to navigate a future where machines might do your job better than you do, we actually have to travel way back into the past.
Back to the cypress wood stage.
Exactly. We are going to the winter of 1424. And we need to talk about a man named Zeami Motokyo. And we really need to talk about this problem of aliveness.
Yeah, the winter of 1424 is a vital anchor point for this whole framework. At this time, Zeami is, I think, in his early 60s.
Right, he's an older guy at this point.
Yeah, he is the founder, the master, and really the primary architect of the classical no theater tradition.
And we have to understand the context of what he actually accomplished.
Absolutely. Because before Zeami, no was essentially a form of popular, somewhat rowdy entertainment.
Like street performance.
Pretty much. It was juggling, acrobatics, really basic storytelling. But Zeami, under the patronage of the shogun, he elevated this popular entertainment into a profoundly sophisticated, deeply philosophical performance art.
And he wasn't just the guy on stage, which is what I found so interesting. He was the theorist. Like, he wrote the manual for this.
Oh, he wrote several manuals. He produced a massive body of theoretical writings. But the most sophisticated ones are the Kushikaden, and later, the treatise we are heavily focusing on today, which is Kakyo.
Kakyo, right. And that translates to the mirror of the flower, doesn't it?
It does. And what is remarkable about these texts is that they are not just practical instruction manuals.
Like, stand here, say this line.
Right. He doesn't just say, put your left foot here and pitch your voice like this. They are arguably the most advanced psychological performance theories produced anywhere in the medieval world. They are fundamentally about the philosophy of human presence.
So let's talk about that word he uses in the title, the flower.
Hana.
Yes, Hana. In his writings, he talks about the flower like it is the absolute holy grail of human endeavor. He basically says if you don't have the flower, you have nothing. So what exactly is this flower?
Hana is Zimi's ultimate aesthetic and spiritual goal. It is that incredibly elusive quality of aliveness.
Aliveness, yeah.
Freshness, spontaneous surprise. It's that thing that utterly captivates a witness. I mean, think about the last time you watched a truly transcendent performance.
Oh, sure. Like a great live concert.
Right. A musician or an athlete perfectly in the zone, or even an incredibly charismatic speaker giving a keynote. When someone has the flower, they're entirely present and you cannot take your eyes off them. The performance just feels effortlessly alive.
I think we've all felt that as an audience member. You watch someone and it just feels like magic is happening in the room.
It really does.
But the paper points out the ultimate paradox of the flower, which is that you can't just decide to have it. Like, I can't just walk onto a stage, grit my teeth, clench my fists, and say, I'm going to be captivating right now.
And that is the central tension of Zimi's entire body of work. Hana cannot be manufactured through sheer mechanical willpower.
You can't force it.
You cannot force the flower to bloom by just trying harder. Zimi understood this, and, modern psychology absolutely confirms it. This quality of living presence only arises when a performer transcends self-conscious technique.
They have to get past the training.
Yes. They pass through all that rigorous training and arrive at a state of effortless, unforced presence.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there because this is where I initially struggled with the source material when I was reading it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I really want to push back on this idea because let's bring this into the real world.
Sure, let's do it.
If I am an actor or a CEO or an ER doctor or anyone trying to be elite at what I do, shouldn't I be intensely focused on what I'm doing?
It seems logical, yes.
Like, if I'm giving the absolute biggest presentation of my life to a board, shouldn't I be highly conscious of my posture? Shouldn't I be scanning the room to see if the board members are paying attention? Just hyper-focused on my own performance.
That is the most natural, intuitive assumption in the world. And it is exactly the assumption Zimi warns will destroy you.
Really? Destroy you?
Absolutely. He gave this trap a specific name. He called it Riken.
Riken.
Right. It translates roughly to self-seeing, or seeing from inside oneself. It is the state of viewing your performance entirely from your own subjective internal position.
So it's essentially being trapped in your own head.
It is the ultimate cognitive trap. When you are in Riken, you are completely absorbed in your own experience of the event.
Like overthinking everything.
Exactly. You are consumed with questions like, how do I feel right now? Am I nervous? Is my hand gesture correct? Did that joke I just made land? Do these people like me?
I do that all the time.
We all do. But the brilliant irony that the research points out is that this total absorption in yourself and your own technique and your own success paradoxically destroys the very connection you were trying to create.
You literally kill the flower.
You crush it because you are no longer present with the audience or the reality of the situation. You are only present with your own anxiety and your own ego.
Oh, wow. That makes so much sense when you think about everyday experiences like the yips in sports.
Oh, the yips are a perfect example.
Right. You have a professional baseball pitcher who has thrown a ball 10,000 times perfectly. It's muscle memory.
Yeah.
But then suddenly he starts thinking about how his elbow bends. He starts checking his own mechanicals from the inside, and boom, he can't throw a strike to save his life.
He's fully in Riken.
Or think about a terrible first date.
Oh, no.
If you're sitting across from someone thinking, am I being charming right now? Is my hair okay? Was that a weird thing to say about my cat? You become so stiff and awkward.
Totally unnatural.
You are totally in Riken. So, okay, if hyper-focusing on yourself ruins the performance, what is the alternative? Just totally letting go and ignoring what you're doing?
No, abandoning discipline is equally destructive. You can't just flail around. The breakthrough concept, the specific solution Zimi introduces in 1424, is a cognitive stance called Riken no Ken.
Riken no Ken. I want to read the literal translation from the paper because it is just so incredibly evocative.
It's a beautiful, yeah.
It translates to the seeing of detached seeing. And ZME wrote, the seeing of Riken no Ken is the seeing that sees from where the audience sees.
Think about the geometry of that for a second.
That is wild.
It really is. It is a profound, almost spatial shift in perspective. Let's break down the actual mechanics of what he is demanding of the performer here.
Yeah, how does one actually do that?
Zimi is describing the cultivated ability to internalize the external perspective of the audience so thoroughly that you actually occupy two psychological positions at the exact same time.
Two positions at once.
Yes, you are fully bodily engaged in the action you are executing, but your center of awareness has shifted out of your own head. You are continuously monitoring how your action registers in the physical space from the outside.
Okay, so if I'm the actor, I am on the stage, swinging the sword, feeling the wood in my hands, sweating, but my awareness is sitting in the third row, watching the guy swinging the sword simultaneously.
Yes, exactly that. And we have to draw a very, very firm line here about what Riken no Ken is not, because it is easily misunderstood in the modern era.
Let's definitely clarify that, because a listener might hear watching yourself from the outside and think, wait, isn't that just dissociation? Like when you experience a trauma and you feel like you are floating above your body.
A brilliant distinction. And the answer is no, it is not dissociation. Dissociation is an escape mechanism.
Right, it's defensive.
It is a detachment from reality to avoid pain. Riken no Ken is the exact opposite. It is hyper-engagement with reality.
Okay, that makes sense.
It is also not that anxious, critical self-monitoring we just talked about with Riken. You aren't standing in the third row judging yourself and saying, you idiot, you missed your mark, your arm is too low.
You aren't heckling yourself from the audience.
Exactly. And lastly, it is not retrospective.
Right, it's not the post-game analysis. It's not sitting in the dressing room an hour later having a drink and thinking, I really nailed that monologue.
Correct. It operates simultaneously with the action. It is a single, unified cognitive gesture of acting and observing at the exact same microsecond. You participate fully without totally identifying with the action.
Okay, this is a beautiful, deeply poetic concept from medieval aesthetic.
It really is.
But here's where the deep dive takes a massive leap, because we are going to fast forward 600 years.
That's time travel.
We are leaving the wooden, incense-scented stages of Kyoto, and we are stepping into the hyper-complex, data-driven world of modern psychology and organizational theory.
Welcome to 2026.
Because the core revelation of this TRI research paper is that this exact concept, this dual awareness, has been independently rediscovered today to solve the crisis of the modern workplace.
And this transition brings us to the contemporary framework that the paper really focuses heavily on, which is the unified theory of psychological existential dynamics, or UT.
The unified theory. Now, I'm looking at this in the source material, and it honestly looks like a massive Frankenstein monster of different academic disciplines.
It is quite dense, yes.
How does this thing actually fit together?
It is an intensely comprehensive model. The unified theory basically integrates four major pillars. It pulls from cognitive psychology, which studies how we process information and think.
Okay.
It pulls from existential philosophy, which deals with meaning, purpose, and identity. It integrates a very specific clinical therapeutic model called rational emotive behavior therapy.
REBT.
Yes, REBT. And finally, it layers in organizational learning theory, which studies how massive corporations behave, adapt, or fail to adapt.
That's a lot of pillars.
It is. But the singular goal of this unified theory is to explain why human beings and human systems break down under the pressure of rapid change.
And within this massive theory, they introduce their modern equivalent of Riken no Ken. They call it reflective agency.
Reflective agency, exactly.
I want to read the Institute's exact definition for the listener because, honestly, every single word pulls weight here. They define reflective agency as the capacity to observe, regulate, and revise one's own thinking while remaining engaged in action.
That definition is incredibly precise. Let's unpack its three components, because this is where the mirror image of Zimi's medieval insight becomes practically actionable for the modern leader.
Okay, let's do it.
The first component is observe.
Okay, observe. This seems like the most direct link back to the No Theater.
It is. In the modern framework, observe refers to metacognitive capacity.
Metacognition.
Yes, which simply means thinking about your own thinking. It is the ability to notice the invisible assumptions, the biases, and the mental frames that are shaping your perception in the present moment.
So it's not just noticing what I'm doing physically. It's noticing the lens through which I'm viewing the world.
Exactly.
It is stepping outside myself to see my own mental machinery operating. That is Riken, no Ken, pure and simple.
Exactly. But here is where the modern theory builds upon the artistic concept and turns it into a corporate survival tool. The second component is regulate.
Regulate. This is where it gets tough, I think.
Why do you say that?
Because noticing my bias is one thing, being like, oh, I'm getting defensive. But not actually freaking out about it is a whole different ballgame.
Precisely. Regulate is the capacity to manage your physiological and psychological state when those deep assumptions are challenged by reality.
Like when the world doesn't play by your rules.
Right. When the world doesn't behave the way your mental model predicts, your brain registers that as a literal threat. Discomfort, anxiety, and defensive anger arise immediately.
Fight or flight kicks in.
Exactly. Regulation is the ability to sit in that fire, to tolerate the extreme discomfort of being wrong or being made obsolete without collapsing into rigid defensive behavior.
And the research links this specific piece, regulation, directly back to that therapy model you mentioned earlier, REBT.
Yes, rational emotive behavior therapy.
Let's talk about Albert Ellis for a second, the founder of REBT, because his concept of must thinking is just so critical here.
Albert Ellis was a huge pioneer of cognitive behavioral therapies back in the mid-20th century. He observed that humans have a very dangerous habit of taking our rational, healthy preferences and escalating them into absolute dogmatic demands.
And he had a great name for it.
He famously and somewhat colorfully called this masturbation.
I just love that term. It's so jarring, but it perfectly captures the absurdity of what we do to ourselves on a daily basis.
It really does. We start by saying something totally reasonable, like, I would strongly prefer to be successful. I prefer the market to adopt my new product.
Which is healthy.
That is very healthy. But under pressure, the human mind twists that preference into a rigid demand. We say, I must be successful. The market must adopt my product. And if it doesn't, it is an absolute catastrophe and I am a worthless failure.
It becomes life or death.
Yes. When we operate in this must mode, we become incredibly brittle. When reality violates our musts, we cannot regulate. We panic.
So observe is seeing the mental machinery at work. Regulate is stopping the machine from overheating and catching fire when it hits a bump in the road.
That's a good way to put it.
And if you could do those two things successfully, you unlock the third component of reflective agency, which is revise.
Revise is the ultimate adaptive act. It is the capacity to actually rewrite your code in real time.
While the software is still running.
Exactly. To update your assumptions, dismantle your outdated frameworks, and align your mental models with the new reality, all while you are still actively making decisions.
Observe your thinking, calm your defensive freakout, and change your mind to fit the data, all while still driving the car at 80 miles an hour.
It is not easy.
No, it's not. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate for the listener here.
Go for it.
Because a skeptic might listen to this and say, okay, guys, this is just fancy corporate jargon for mindfulness. Take a deep breath, notice you were stressed, try to be open-minded. What makes reflective agency fundamentally different from, like, basic mindfulness 101?
That is a very critical pushback, and addressing it reveals the true depth of the research we're looking at. The difference between basic mindfulness and reflective agency lies entirely in its ontological scope.
Ontological scope. Okay, that is a very heavy academic term.
It is a bit thick, yeah.
Let's ground that. Ontology is the study of the nature of being, right? So what does it mean in this practical context?
Let's use an analogy. Basic mindfulness is like observing the weather outside your house. You notice it is raining, you notice the wind is blowing, you might even notice a window is rattling in the frame.
You acknowledge the rain and let it pass.
Right. Reflective agency, on the other hand, is observing the invisible foundational bedrock that your entire house is built upon, while the ground is experiencing an earthquake.
Wow, okay, that escalates things significantly.
It does, because in the unified theory, the researchers point out that the most consequential and dangerous assumptions we hold are not about what we are doing, but about what we are.
Who we fundamentally are as people.
Yes. These are called our legitimation structures.
Legitimation structures. Let me see if I have this right from the reading. These are the deep, often entirely unconscious narratives that make us feel like our existence in the world is valid or legitimate, like we have a right to be here.
Precisely. Let's bring it into the workplace to make it concrete.
Yeah, give me an example.
If you are a senior software architect, your legitimation structure probably isn't just, I write code to earn a paycheck.
No, it's deeper than that.
Much deeper. Over 20 years it has become. I'm a master builder of complex systems. My ability to foresee structural software flaws is rare, it is highly valuable, and it is the core reason my colleagues respect me and my family is secure. That is your ontology. That is your identity scaffolding.
Right. Okay, so if a new AI tool comes along tomorrow and writes better code than you, but it has a few bugs,
Yeah.
basic mindfulness is just noticing, oh, I feel frustrated that this AI has bugs.
Right.
But reflective agency is noticing, I am feeling profound existential terror right now because this machine is threatening the scaffolding of my identity as a master builder. I am demanding that my expertise remain uniquely valuable.
Exactly. When reality challenges those deep legitimation structures, the resistance you experience isn't just a cognitive puzzle. It isn't a math error you're trying to fix. It is existential.
It feels like death.
Your brain reacts as if you were being physically hunted by a predator. You feel like your very self is being annihilated. Reflective agency is the rare, trained capacity to tolerate and navigate that specific existential threat without shutting down defensively.
That is intense, and it makes total sense why that is infinitely harder than just, noticing your breath for 10 minutes on a meditation app.
Absolutely.
So now we have Ziemi in 1424 talking about an aesthetic flower on a wooden stage. And we have modern organizational psychologists in 2026 talking about existential legitimation structures and cognitive regulation.
Convergence is striking.
It really is. And this brings us to what the paper calls the triangulation argument. Why does it matter that these wildly different worlds look so similar?
It matters deeply because of the epistemological weight of independent discovery.
You break that down.
Think about how we find truth in science. If one researcher in one lab discovers a phenomenon, well, it's interesting.
Sure, maybe a fluke, but interesting.
But if 4 different researchers working in completely different scientific fields, using completely different instruments, all discover the exact same phenomenon without ever talking to each other, the probability that they have stumbled onto a fundamental law of nature becomes astronomical.
Right. It's like 4 different detectives living in 4 different centuries, investigating completely different crimes, and all of them arrive at the exact same fingerprint.
That is a perfect analogy. The paper meticulously maps out how 4 distinct intellectual traditions all converged on this exact same psychological mechanism.
The 4 detectives.
Yes. We've discussed aesthetics, represented by Ziemi in the 15th century. We've discussed psychotherapy, represented by Albert Ellis and REBT in the 20th century. We've touched on existential philosophy, which deals with our identity and legitimation. But let's look deeply at the 4th detective, organizational theory.
Wow. Yes.
Specifically, the work of Chris Argyris and Donald Schoen.
Yes, let's definitely unpack Argyris because his work is just so foundational for anyone who has ever worked in a big company and wondered, why is everyone in this building acting so crazy?
It explains so much. Argyris studied organizational behavior, and he discovered a terrifying phenomenon. He found that highly intelligent, successful professionals are actually the worst at learning new things when their underlying assumptions are threatened.
The smartest people are the most defensive.
Precisely. He differentiated between 2 types of learning, single-loop learning and double-loop learning.
Walk us through that difference, because it maps perfectly to what we were talking about with reflective agency.
Okay, single-loop learning is like a thermostat. You set it to 70 degrees. If the room gets too cold, the heat turns on. If it gets too hot, the AC turns on.
Basic cause and effect.
Right. The system adjusts its actions to meet a predefined goal. In business, this is a team tweaking a marketing campaign to hit their quarterly numbers. It's necessary, but it's superficial.
Right, like, our ad didn't work on Facebook, let's change the font to blue.
Exactly. But double-loop learning is fundamentally different. Double-loop learning is when the thermostat asks, wait, why am I set to 70 degrees in the first place? Is 70 degrees even the right temperature for this environment?
It questions the premise.
Yes. It involves questioning and altering the underlying goal or assumption itself.
And Argyris found that corporations are just terrible at this.
Horrendous at it. Because double-loop learning threatens people's legitimation structures.
It all comes back to that.
Always. If you question the fundamental goal of a division, the VP of that division feels existentially threatened. Their job, their status, their identity is tied to that 70-degree goal. So to protect themselves from that discomfort, organizations create what Argyris called defensive routines.
Defensive routines, like bureaucracy and red tape.
Yes. They actively design policies and behaviors to hide their own failures from themselves. They sweep the real systemic problems under the rug to avoid the pain of double-loop learning.
So they collectively agree to stay trapped in Gakken. They demand the world fit their old business model.
Exactly.
And this is where all the detectives point to the same fingerprint. So what does Ziemi, Ellis, Argyris, and the unified theory all fundamentally agree on?
They agree on three absolute truths regarding human performance. First, they all agree that this capacity for dual awareness, whether you call it reflective agency, Riken no Ken, or double loop learning, requires immense active cultivation.
It
is not the default setting of the human brain. You do not just acquire it by getting older, and you certainly don't get it just by being promoted to middle management.
Right. Experience does not equal adaptability. You could literally just be repeating the exact same rigid single loop mistakes for 20 years and call it experience.
Exactly. Second, all four traditions agree that the absence of this capacity results in the exact same catastrophic failure mode, a self-system that violently loses its ability to revise itself.
This is the mind-blowing part to me. The failure mode is literally identical across centuries.
It is. Think about the medieval actor clinging to a style he used when he was 20, refusing to adapt to his aging body. He kills his Hana.
Right.
Now look at the therapy client who absolutely demands that their spouse behave a certain way, destroying the marriage through rigid must thinking.
Yep.
Now look at the Fortune 500 company that aggressively protects its legacy product line, refusing to acknowledge a disruptive technology and driving themselves straight into bankruptcy through defensive routines. It is the exact same underlying pathology.
The self becomes so fused with its past success that identity just completely blocks reality.
Exactly. And the third thing they all agree on is the hopeful part. This state is achievable. It is a trainable human capacity.
We are doomed.
We aren't. So if we synthesize all of this, we have a universally recognized, incredibly powerful cognitive skill that prevents catastrophic rigidity.
But that begs the massive question of this entire deep dive. Why is Professor Takasugi ringing the alarm bell about this right now? Why an April 2026 technical note?
Because the environmental conditions of the human species have abruptly changed. The paper argues that the era of advanced artificial intelligence is applying a novel, unprecedented psychological pressure to human beings.
Unprecedented.
Yes, a pressure we have literally never encountered in our evolutionary history.
Okay, let me push back here on behalf of the skeptical listener. Because, every time a new technology comes out, people say it's unprecedented.
It's true, they do.
People freaked out about the printing press. They freaked out about the steam engine. We survived the Industrial Revolution. We survived the invention of the microchip in the spreadsheet. How is AI fundamentally any different from a tractor or a calculator?
Is a critical question, and it's one we have to answer clearly. The difference lies in what the technology actually replaces. The tractor replaced human muscle.
Right.
The calculator replaced human rote computation. Those technologies changed how we executed our expertise, but they left the core domain of human cognitive mastery completely intact.
If anything, they elevated it, right?
In fact, they did. The farmer became an expert in agricultural management. The accountant became an expert in financial strategy.
So past tech was basically a tool that amplified our identity.
Yes. But AI, specifically the generative reasoning models of the 2026 landscape we are dealing with now, does not just replace the execution of basic tasks. It is increasingly replicating the synthesis, the judgment, and the reasoning that historically defined expert human value.
The deep stuff.
Exactly. It is directly colonizing the territory of deep cognitive expertise.
It's not just doing the heavy lifting. It's doing the deep thinking.
Precisely. And this triggers an immediate systemic ontological crisis. Let's go back to our listener for a second.
Okay.
Let's say you are a world-class radiologist.
Yeah.
You've spent 25 years staring at complex medical imaging, learning to spot the microscopic shadows of disease that absolutely no one else can see.
That's your life's work.
That is your Hana.
Yeah.
That is your flower. Your entire identity, your status, your sense of worth in the universe is built on the premise that your eyes are uniquely capable of saving lives.
Okay, I'm with you.
Now, a hospital administrator installs an AI diagnostic system. It processes 1 million scans a second. It spots the shadows faster than you, it's more accurate than you, and it never needs to sleep. The core premise of your expertise has just been evaporated by a machine.
So the chilling question the listener has to ask themselves is, what am I if what I spent my life training to do can now be done perfectly by an algorithm?
Exactly. That is the literal collapse of a legitimation structure. And when human beings face that level of existential threat, we do not naturally react with grace and curiosity.
Definitely not.
We experience what the TRI framework formally defines as the adaptation paradox.
The adaptation paradox. This feels like the absolute crux of the modern crisis. Walk us through how this paradox plays out in real time.
The paradox states that profound uncertainty and threat intensify our psychological rigidity precisely at the exact moment when psychological flexibility is most critical for our survival.
So when we need to be flexible the most, we get the stiffest.
Exactly. When your identity as a radiologist is threatened, your biological instinct is not to open your mind to new possibilities. Your instinct is to armor up. You retreat violently into must mode.
You regress right back to Albert Ellis's masturbation.
Exactly. You start pounding the table in the boardroom. You say, the patients must have a human touch. The algorithm must be flawed. The hospital must recognize my seniority. You demand that the external world conform to the shape of your historical expertise.
It's like skidding on a patch of ice in your car.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
The one thing you absolutely need to do to survive that skid is take your foot off the brake and steer into the skid.
Right.
But your primitive brain is screaming, danger. So you slam your foot on the brake, lock the wheels, and practically guarantee a crash.
A perfect analogy. And if Zimi were sitting in that modern boardroom, watching that radiologist or that executive pound the table, he would recognize the sickness immediately.
He'd know exactly what it was.
He would look at them and say, this person is hopelessly trapped in Riken. They are entirely absorbed in their own subjective terror of irrelevance. They cannot see the room. They cannot see the reality of the technology in front of them. They have lost the flower.
So the real problem we are facing with AI isn't an information gap. Like the executives pounding the table aren't stupid. They read the same data everyone else does.
Of course they do.
The gap is entirely psychological. Knowing that you need to adapt to AI is not at all the same thing as being psychologically capable of surviving the adaptation.
Precisely. And this is why reflective agency is positioned as the specific, non-negotiable antidote to the AI era.
Because it allows you to break the adaptation paradox.
It does. Let's run the radiologist scenario again. But this time, the radiologist has cultivated a reflective agency. They have trained in Riken no Ken.
Okay, pig 2.
The hospital administrator shows them the AI outperforming them. The physiological threat response still happens. The heart rate spikes, the stomach drops, the feeling of existential dread arises.
They still feel it.
They are still human, but because they have a trained metacognitive capacity, they split their awareness.
They occupy 2 positions simultaneously.
Yes, they are sitting in the chair feeling the terror, but they are also observing the terror from the third row. They can say to themselves, I am noticing that my heart is racing. I am noticing that I am furiously demanding that my years of training still be uniquely valuable. I am watching my legitimation structure try to defend itself.
And because they can observe it, they aren't consumed by it. They don't slam their foot on the brake.
Exactly. They regulate, they tolerate the profound discomfort of their own obsolescence without turning it into a defensive must. And because the mind is not locked in defense, voluntary revision becomes possible.
And they can pivot.
Yes. They can look at the administrator and say, the machine sees the shadows better than I do. The reality has changed. Therefore, my value must change. How do I use my deep medical context to manage this machine? They pivot, and the flowers survive.
It is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But honestly, it sounds unbelievably difficult.
It is not easy.
It sounds like psychological jujitsu, which leads us perfectly into the final and most crucial section of the Takasugi paper. From artistic masterpiece to trainable leadership skill.
Yes, the practical application.
Because if reflective agency is the literal prerequisite for not going obsolete in the next 5 years, how do I actually get it? Because I don't feel like I have it naturally.
And you shouldn't feel bad about that because the source material is adamant on this point. Practically no one has it naturally. We look at highly adaptive, Zen-like leaders, and we assume they are just genetically gifted. But Xiaomi didn't believe Riken no Ken was a gift. It was the product of a grueling, lifelong training architecture. The No tradition took children and trained them for decades to develop this dual awareness.
Right. It wasn't just a director saying, hey, try to watch yourself from the outside. Good luck out there, kid. It was a systemic pedagogy.
And Professor Takasugi's ultimate call to action is that in the AI era, we must democratize this elite training.
Bring it to the masses.
Exactly. It can no longer be reserved for aesthetic masters or intensive therapy patients. It has to become the core curriculum of modern professional development. We must train the workforce for ontological flexibility the exact same way we currently train them for cybersecurity or compliance.
Okay, let's get incredibly practical for the listener here. The paper outlines 3 specific domains of training: I want to walk through a hypothetical Monday morning for a professional trying to actually build these muscles.
Okay, let's do it.
So domain number 1 is metacognitive practice.
This is the foundational layer. Metacognitive practice is training the habit of real-time observation. Notice the phrase real-time.
Not after the fact.
Right. It is not reflective journaling on a Sunday night with a cup of tea. It is the capacity to identify your own mental frames, specifically your must thinking, in the heat of the action.
So how do I do that? Give me a scenario.
Let's say you are leading a project status meeting. A junior employee suggests using a new AI workflow that totally bypasses a process you personally designed 3 years ago.
Oh, I'd hate that.
Right, you feel a flash of irritation. Metacognitive practice means catching that spark before it becomes a fire. In that exact second, you mentally step back and say, I am experiencing irritation. Why? Because I am demanding that my historical contribution be respected. I am treating my process as a must.
You literally label the thought while the meeting is still happening.
Yes. You don't have to agree with the junior employee. You just have to clearly see your own bias in responding to them. This requires immense mental bandwidth, which is why it must be practiced daily until it becomes an automatic background process.
That leads directly to the second domain, which I think is probably the hardest one, ontological flexibility training. I like to translate this as holding your identity lightly.
That is a brilliant translation, honestly. Ontological flexibility is the deliberate practice of uncoupling your ultimate sense of self-worth from your specific, perishable skills.
You detach your ego from the task.
Exactly. It is moving your identity up a level of abstraction.
So instead of saying, I'm a financial modeler, building spreadsheets is who I am, what should I be saying instead?
You practice framing it as, I am a highly analytical thinker who solves complex business problems. Currently, I apply that intelligence through financial modeling. But if a machine does the modeling, my underlying intelligence remains intact and can just be directed elsewhere.
Wow. You're basically building a legitimation structure that is immune to technological disruption.
Exactly. But training this requires actually experiencing the threat.
You can't just theorize it.
No, you have to practice having your governing assumptions challenged without feeling existentially annihilated. In a corporate setting, this means creating environments where leaders are routinely, safely proven wrong and coaching them to shift their neurological response from defensive closure, like, no, you're wrong, to curious inquiry. Fascinating. The machine found a variable I missed. How does it see the world?
It's literally rewiring the threat response in your brain.
It is.
And that brings us to the third domain, scenario-based reflection. This sounds a lot like running simulations.
It is deliberate, high-stakes practice. You don't wait for the crisis to hit. You systematically engineer it ahead of time. In organizational training, this involves placing teams in complex, simulated environments where their historical rules of thumb actively cause them to fail.
You set them up to crash.
You force the single-loop learning to break.
Give me an example of what that looks like in practice.
Imagine a war game scenario for an executive team. You give them a simulated quarter to run the business, but you introduce an unexpected AI competitor that completely neutralizes their core product line. You watch them fail.
Sounds brutal.
It is. But the real training isn't the failure. It is the immediate, structured reflection afterward. You ask them, at what exact moment did you realize your old framework was dead? What did that feel like in your body? Why did you keep funding the marketing campaign when the data showed it was useless? Which of your musts blinded you to the reality of the simulation?
You use the simulation to map their defensive routines. You force them to practice double-loop learning in a safe sandbox, so when the real AI disruption hits on a random Tuesday, they already have the muscle memory to handle it.
Precisely. Synthesizing these three domains, metacognition, ontological flexibility, and scenario training, creates a workforce capable of continuous self-revision.
So stepping back and looking at the massive picture we've painted today, the AI era essentially means we have all been pushed onto Zini's wooden stage.
We are all performers now.
The lights are glaring, the audience is watching, and the ground beneath our feet is shifting faster than the human brain ever evolved to handle. Maintaining effective agency, keeping your wits about you, regulating your terror, and revising your identity is no longer a luxury for the enlightened few.
It's not optional.
No, it is the baseline requirement for staying relevant in the modern economy.
It is the defining survival trait of the 21st century. The trajectory that Professor Takasugi outlines in this research is both starkly terrifying and profoundly beautiful.
It really is.
clinging desperately to the past, moving from healthy desire into rigid must mode, demanding that the universe respect your outdated expertise. That is the death of the flower. That is how your aliveness fades into bitterness and obsolescence. Reflective agency is simply the contemporary scientific name for the capacity that keeps the flower blooming.
It is what allows you, the listener, to remain fully, dynamically present to a reality that is rewriting its own rules every single day.
It allows you to observe your fear without becoming your fear. It allows you to revise your purpose without losing your presence.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you, our listener, with one final, lingering thought to mull over as you go about your week.
The big takeaway.
Yeah. This is an extrapolation of everything we've discussed today, pushing the logic to its absolute limit. We have spent an hour talking about how AI challenges human expertise. But let's imagine the timeline a decade or two from now.
Looking into the future.
Imagine a world where AI eventually masters the literal execution of almost all our professional techniques. It writes the code perfectly. It diagnoses the illness flawlessly. It manages the global supply chain without a single error. It executes the physical and cognitive labor of society, the way a flawless machine might perform a perfect, mathematically precise dance.
A flawless execution, yes, but an execution entirely devoid of the human experience of meaning.
Exactly. If the machine is doing all the doing, then perhaps the ultimate human job of the future isn't doing the work at all.
That's a huge shift.
We have spent centuries defining ourselves by our output. But if the output is completely automated, perhaps human existence in the AI era will transition entirely into the practice of Riken no Ken at a civilizational scale.
We become the audience that gives the performance its context.
We will act as the permanent, detached, yet deeply present observers to our own artificial creations. The machines will dance on the stage. They will build, they will compute, they will execute. And our job, our exclusively, irreducibly human job, will be to continuously observe, regulate, and revise the meaning of what it is to be human in relation to that dance. We will be the consciousness of the system.
A civilization of observers maintaining the flower of human meaning.
A civilization maintaining the flower. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the mind of Xiaomi and the future of artificial intelligence. Take this with you into your Monday morning meetings. Keep observing your frames. Keep regulating your panic. Keep revising your reality. And whatever you do, keep your flyer alive.